We kick off episode number 21 of the Night Shift on this Tuesday night, November 10th, folks, with some breaking news, giving folks alongside our usual late night sports talk show owl, Isaiah Leung, yours truly, Callan, McClurg, joining you here. With that, though, folks, some breaking news, though, right off the top of our program in men's college basketball. This comes courtesy of Madeline Coleman, a writer from SportsIllustrated.com, who reports that Wichita State is parting ways with their longtime head coach, Greg Marshall, by the end of the week, according to her report, and also from Stadium's Jeff Goodman. But the Shockers of Wichita State and Greg Marshall are set to part ways by the end of the week. The currently, or as of right now, folks, the head coach of the Shockers is currently under investigation for allegedly physically and emotionally abusing players, accusations that he does deny. In a statement posted back in October, Marshall wrote the following by saying, "My coaching style is not for everyone. Many players thrive in the system we have created and are energized by our team culture. For those players, I am a motivator, a pusher, someone who can tap into their greatest potential. For others, I can be demanding, harsh, or strict, and I don't argue with those descriptions. What I am not is demeaning or abusive. I have respect for all of my players, and I also believe unequivocally in their values as athletes, as students, and as people. Any portrayal of me to the contrary is wrong," close quote. He did, though, double down and deny the allegations again on October 13th in a statement to the Wichita Eagle. He also wrote sometime around October 13th, in response to the allegations put forward in the media, "I simply state unequivocally that I have never physically struck a player or a colleague, and allegations claiming otherwise are false," close quote. You know, Isaiah, this is a very touchy subject, more so in college athletics. It's been this way, though, Bud, I'd say for a while, with a lot of recent news, I'd say, in the last maybe 3 to 5 years, men's basketball, women's basketball, a lot of coaches in hot water over alleged physical abuse of players, mental abuse. There was video, I think, a while back of a coach who will get so upset at his players for failing at a drill, he would throw basketballs at them and hit them in the back or somewhere, on the rear end and stuff like that. There's been, notably here in San Diego, Beth Burns, a longtime great SDSU women's basketball coach, was relieved of her duty after apparently video surfaced of her slapping one of her colleagues on the knee during a big play in a game, and that was taken the wrong way. She now, I believe, is still working at USC. Marlene Stallings, who was the longtime women's basketball coach for the past couple years at Minnesota, went to Texas Tech and also had players leave her team or report to the school administration in regards to, again, either Stallings or coaches perhaps abusing players, either physically, mentally. And now, of course, Isaiah, it now boils down, though, to Greg Marshall, the head coach at Wichita State, who, again, man, for the longest time was not really known in college basketball. But, of course, they had a couple of great runs in the tournament, and they kind of, in a way, got the national spotlight on Wichita, Kansas. And now, though, man, sadly, it boils down, though, to alleged physical and emotional abuse by Greg Marshall towards players. Again, of course, he's denied the reports, though. But Isaiah, give us your thoughts here and also your reaction about, for one, though, the school and Marshall parting ways, but also the recent track record, though, of coaches more so at the college level, more so losing their jobs, though, over maybe stuff of this caliber with either abuse of their colleagues, their coaches, or above all else, abuse of their players.
Well, Callan, before I get into this, though, I got to say I'm very disappointed because when you put out the breaking news segment, I thought that the breaking news was that I had won the presidency of the United States of America. I mean, I had a bottle of apple cider right there. I had some party poppers. I was about to celebrate, and then it comes down to this news, so I was kind of very disappointed. But in all seriousness, though, about this, the Greg Marshall news, I honestly, for me, when I first heard about it, I thought he was going to get fired because normally when like this type of stuff comes out, the result ends up being the coach gets canned. And I believe I read somewhere that some of the allegations. I don't know if like they found this out to be true or not, but some of the allegations were that Greg Marshall would throw basketballs at his players if they got if they got the drill, if they messed up the drill. I think he even slapped someone, if I'm correct, and he also he punched a couple of his players as well. That was some of the allegations, and like it's common sense. You can't hit people. Like I don't care if you're working in sports, you're working in the fire industry, if you're working in the medical industry, you can't hit people no matter the situation. If you hit someone, you're gonna get relieved of your job and you're gonna go to jail. So I think that this is a no-brainer. Greg Marshall needs to be fired because the stuff that he has been doing at Wichita State, or the allegations that players alleged him to do, that's not tolerable. You can't be doing that. You can't be punching your own players. You can't be throwing basketballs at people. That's assault right there.
Isaiah, I think that this, sadly, man, just kind of, like I said, though, adds on to a recent stretch of years, though, more so recently, where, again, we have seen coaches parting ways, or, again, mutually deciding to part ways, again, perhaps resigning from their spots and not using the F word, that of course, is F-I-R-E-D, from their position, but more so, again, mutual parting of ways, resigning on their own, though. But that there's been a lot more of this, I think, that has been, more so recently. And I think, like I've said, though, Beth Burns was a very well-respected women's basketball coach at San Diego State, lost her job after a video came out of her slapping a male assistant coach on the kneecap, or on the knee, after a great play was made. And I think the video kind of got twisted and tweaked a bit, kind of wrung out like a washcloth in the shower, and it all went down the drain for Beth Burns. She leaves and goes to help coach the great Cynthia Cooper-Dyke at USC as an assistant coach. That's one thing. There's also, of course, like I said, about Marlene Stallings, again, who was at the time the coach at Minnesota, left that program in shambles, went down to Texas Tech, kind of got the team back to where they were at, though. But a lot of players, though, were, telling the school president, I think telling other coaches that, or telling other people that pretty much that there was a lot of, mental abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse by Stallings and her coaching staff. And Isaiah, I think more so, man, and I know that people are probably saying, this is just getting out of, blown out of proportion because, they're college kids and they're soft and whatnot. But Isaiah, it is a new time and a new demographic. And it is, again, 2020, though, Isaiah, where more of this stuff, though, if it does come to light, though, there's going to be swift action taken against that coach or against that program. Isaiah, what more, I guess, do you make, though, more so about Greg Marshall and more so about maybe other instances, though, of students or players, I should say, though, reporting abuse done by coaching staff members, not just the head coach, but again, maybe assistants or maybe someone else working with that specific team at colleges across the country?
Well, I'm glad they're doing it, because used to those players, they would just keep everything silent. They would just sweep it under the rug. And then years later, then they would report it 10, 20 years later after they had retired. Then they would report it. And then people would just be like, why didn't you report it when you were playing for that coach? We could have solved the situation then. Now it's 20, 30 years later. There's really nothing that you can do. But about the whole Greg Marshall thing, I think that, now mental health is now a big, big thing in our society. You hear there's people always thinking about suicide. There's people always, just having really bad mental health. And there's a lot of resources for that now. And that's a big thing right now in our society. And the stuff that, is being alleged of Greg Marshall, you just can't do that now, especially in a society nowadays where we're prioritizing mental health. We're prioritizing, physical abuse. Guys are or players now are taking the initiative and, standing up to what they feel is wrong. And I got to applaud those players for that.
Absolutely, for sure. Again, folks, breaking news to kick off our 21st episode here, the night shift on this Tuesday, November 10th. But again, it is Greg Marshall, the longtime men's basketball coach at Wichita State, per reports from Sports Illustrated and Stadium. Again, the school and Marshall will be parting ways by the end of this week again, due to, again, claims made of physical and emotional abuse by the players in regards to Marshall and how he's handled coaching the Shockers over the past several seasons at this time. With that, Isaiah, some thoughts, though, more so from the MI6 faithful about this situation. Christy Wilson, Isaiah, adds on, though, to another one I may have missed, though, in regards to college basketball. But she says that this Greg Marshall situation reminds me of what happened some years ago at Rutgers. Now, I don't recall if it was the men's team or C. Vivian Stringer's women's team, but there was also, I believe, some allegations of abuse done by the Scarlet Knights, either the men's team or maybe somehow the women's team. And again, C. Vivian Stringer's probably the most, right now, I think longest or one of the longest tenured women's basketball coaches in the game right now. So I don't recall if it was the men or women, but I know that it was one of those teams, though, with some abuse done by the basketball program. James Gonzalez, tuning in from beautiful and snowy and cold Julian, California, says, what happened at Rutgers years ago was awful and caught on camera. Same with Bobby Knight at Indiana. Let's not forget about Bobby Knight, though, as well, with his tenure as well. And to clarify, it was the Rutgers men's team that was also in hot water with some abuse allegations. With that in mind, Isaiah, what do you got to add on for this breaking news story?
I need to go to Christy Wilson's comment where she says the votes haven't been counted yet, Isaiah. Christy, I'm so thankful that you believe in me. Thank you so much. We're going to win this election. We are going to – the hope, the dream is still alive.
Well, you are a Niners fan, and I think the slogan is something about being faithful. So keep the faith, Isaiah. Yeah. Eventually you'll get there. But again, folks, the breaking news at the top of the show. But once more, folks, longtime Wichita State men's basketball head coach Greg Marshall. Again, folks, per reports from two sources, both Stadium and Sports Illustrated, again, reports gathered saying that he will, in fact, be parting ways with the Shockers following, again, claims made by the student athletes of his program for both physical and perhaps emotional abuse as well over his time coaching Wichita State. With that, Isaiah, to the main talking points and into our regular segments here, folks, for the night shift. And again, folks, it is our 21st episode. Shout out to the GOAT, Hillary Knight, of the U.S. Women's National Hockey Team. With that in mind, Isaiah, over in the NFL, though, man, of course, Week 10 begins on Thursday. But also, Isaiah, per the man himself, Adam Schefter, he reports that the NFL has put together a brand new contingency plan in case teams cannot play all 16 of their games, again, due to concerns of COVID-19. But Schefter reports that the owners have began planning for the possibility that their 2020 regular season will be cut short by COVID-19 related cancellations, one of several developments from a 2-hour video meeting held on Tuesday. In a conference call, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell reiterated that the league is quote-unquote committed to playing the full 17-game or week interval schedule. But after the league's most recent COVID-19 testing report indicated a sharp rise in confirmed cases, Goodell acknowledged that the importance of determining an alternative should the season end with not all the teams playing 16 games. If that does happen, folks, the NFL will again expand their recently expanded postseason field from 14 to 16 teams, split equally among the AFC and NFC, though it was not immediately clear how many games would be needed to cancel for the 16-team bracket to be enacted, per Schefter's reports. And again, Isaiah, but it's kind of in a way, though, man, been the very big talking point, I'd say, more so because of how we have seen, more so Week 9, I think, play out with the very unclear and untransparent reasoning behind the game between Green Bay and San Francisco being played on Thursday. And we still have had an uptick in cases, but also, like I said, though, earlier on Tuesday morning, was that the Steelers have had to put 4 players on their COVID list, including Ben Roethlisberger for having close contact with Van McDonald, apparently, per reports gathered. So, Isaiah, give us your thoughts on both the expanded, but on, first of all, on the new plan in place, which I think, though, Isaiah, is great, though, that the league is doing this just in case they don't meet that they don't meet the 16-game threshold for all the teams. But also, Isaiah, your thoughts, though, about the NFL once again expanding their playoff fields from what was supposed to be a 14-team playoff to now an even-Steven 16 teams in the postseason party, if in fact, though, that plan has to be used.
Well, Callan, my thoughts on it is that my man right here now has a legit chance to make the playoffs here in 2018. The 49ers still have a little bit of hope left. So I really love this plan. But, For me, this plan is a great plan because, we've already seen with baseball, the St. Louis Cardinals only played 58 games this season due to the coronavirus. We've seen, other leagues having to, cut their season shorts like the NBA because of COVID and then resume it later. So this virus is very, very unpredictable. And, there's not like, for me, when I think about or when I look at each week of football, my mindset is always just to enjoy that week because I don't know if there's gonna be next week in when it comes to football because of how like football involves so much contact and players are traveling from the West Coast to the East Coast and the East Coast to the West Coast. So there's a lot of like logistic problems going on with the National Football League regarding the coronavirus. So I'm glad that they enacted this plan because if they didn't, and you said like let's say there were 2 or 3 teams that played 14 games and one team played 16 games, and those 2 teams that played 14 games had a better winning percentage than the team that played the entire 16-game schedule. Obviously, that team that played the 16 games and couldn't miss the playoffs because they had a worse winning percentage than the team that played 14 games, they would be in uproar. They'll be like, oh, it's not fair, obviously, because that team played 2 less games than us. So obviously they're going to have a better winning percentage than us. So it's not fair. And, you're going to see a lot of unhappy players, a lot of unhappy coaches, a lot of unhappy owners if they kept it with their original plan. So I'm glad that they have a contingency plan. And now I just hope that, the NFL, that they can somehow, some way get all the games in that they need to get in.
Isaiah, I think that football fans were long waiting for the league to kind of, in a way, come up with something because they have somewhat, in a way, been very, like I've said, though, they've been unclear and not very transparent about how they've handled the situation. I think they've done a good job so far, though. But I think we all knew, though, that eventually that there was going to be somewhat of an uptick or an increase in COVID cases among the NFL as more time went on, as we now get, later into the year, again, going into week 10. Only about 7 weeks of the season are left now, but now going towards November, the weather is changing. Of course, days are being shorter with the daylight not being there, as already mentioned plenty of times, though. But now, though, at least I say that now, though, there's a safety net in place, I think, now, as we look at this. That now there's a safety plan in place, though, where there's probably going to be maybe some procedures, maybe some tiebreakers, maybe, win percentage becomes a thing now for the season, though, but more so, I think it's great, though, that they're going to at least add one more playoff team into the equation, though, to probably, I think, for one, make things a little bit easier, though, just in case, though, like you said, Isaiah, that perhaps that schedule is not fulfilled as time does move on. And one thought about this, Christy agrees. This is a good plan, but I think it's more so, Isaiah, good, though, that the NFL finally, in a way, laid out a blueprint, though, for a backup plan in case, though, things do not get better as more time goes on.
Yeah, I completely agree with it, but I also think the NFL needs to come up with harsher on-field and off-field policies that the players need to follow. Because right now, when I see it every game, the players, I know they get tested every week or every day, but they're not wearing their mask on the sidelines. The coaches are wearing their mask, but when they're on the sidelines and they're mingling with their teammates, they're not wearing their masks. Like they could easily transmit the coronavirus if they somehow, some way had it to one of their teammates. So I think like the NFL needs to come up with stricter policies regarding mask wear on the sidelines, because I know like the players, they just played a defensive possession or an offensive possession and they're trying to get a breather, but still you got to wear your mask so you don't transmit this virus to your teammates. And also, I think what the NFL, they need to do what baseball and the NBA did. I think they need to move the players to a hotel for the final 2 months of this season as we head into the playoffs, because that way, like I know like they're gonna be apart from their families and stuff like that, but hey, you're still getting money, you're still getting paid, and you're still playing the game that you love. And teams can keep track of where you're going, who have you been around, and it's more easier for them to do contact tracing and other stuff like that they need to do just in case there is a coronavirus case found among the players.
I think that the NFL has done probably, I think, Isaiah, a better job, though, of enforcing masks. I know that baseball, of course, made it, optional. Guys elected to wear them, though. But at the NFL, though, I think they've done a good job, though, of, I think, enforcing the rules. So now, yes, so it's a matter of, will the players actually follow the rules? So, but again, let's not forget, though, everyone, the NFL has been slapping coaches with massive fines, and I think that the Raiders, I think, even faced harsher discipline for repeatedly offending the rules in regards to not wearing masks on the sidelines. Again, we saw Pete Carroll get fined. John Gruden's been fined a couple of times. I think, Isaiah, but so far, though, yes, there's probably been some resistance, or maybe just guys are forgetting, maybe a little bit too much of the NFL's liking them. But I think, though, that the NFL has done a good job, though, of at least, though, enforcing the policy so far through all 9 weeks played of the season. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree with it, but I think, just like what James Gonzalez said, I think that the NFL, like, they need to do what baseball did. They need to spread the players that, aren't playing out to like the suites and into the stands and not on the sideline, because, the lesser the people on the sidelines, the better for the NFL. I think that would be a great idea. And also, I think that yes, gathering the players would be good. I think you have to enforce masks on the sidelines because, we saw what happened with Green Bay, A.J. Dillon. They got tested on Sunday, but let's not forget, guys, the result, when you get tested on Sunday, the result doesn't come back to that night. So you could be playing that game with the coronavirus, which I think is the stupidest thing ever. I think the NFL needs to switch to a faster testing system because that system is just not acceptable. You can't get tested on Sunday and then play the game with the virus, and then later on it comes out you get the virus, and who knows, and then you probably would have like 16, 20, 25 people get infected with the virus, and there's an outbreak started right there because you came into contact with all those people that are at the stadium that day.
James also said, to clarify about the Raiders, they had a 6th-round pick taken from them, and plus they were fined for the repeated mask mandate offenses on their radar. But again, folks, the NFL has again set forth a new contingent plan again that would call for a 16-team playoff in case that teams do not make the 16-game threshold. That would perhaps again be done by win percentage at this time. With that, Isaiah, very interesting developments in the NBA, buddy. Literally 8 days away from the NBA draft coming up on November 18th, and that is revolving around a potential trade between the Thunder and Suns involving Chris Paul going to Phoenix, per reports gathered from 2 reporters, including Brian Windhurst of ESPN.com. But the Suns have discussions right now about acquiring all-star point guard Chris Paul from Oklahoma City, per sources. Talks have been ongoing and have continued to gain traction, but there is no deal imminent, per sources, as there's currently right now a moratorium on trades as the NBA goes through procedures to start next season ahead of the league's planned draft taking place next week. Isaiah, I don't know what to make of this, though, man, but there seems to be, though, this sudden urgency, I think, for the Suns to perhaps do for one, maybe land, probably one of the best point guards in the game in my mind right now, or perhaps of his career, though. But at the same time, though, at what cost, though? Are you talking about Paul for Booker? Are you talking about Paul for Booker and draft picks? Are you talking about, Paul for, maybe another one of their young guns like a Deontay Ayton and draft picks? This trade, I think, would scare, or probably scares a lot of Suns fans, though, because I think as well, Isaiah, with that report, though, that Devin Booker wants out of Phoenix, this, I think, begins that process, though, of the Suns fans going, oh, no, here we go again. But your thoughts, though, about the rumors, though, Isaiah, CP3 possibly being dealt to the Suns sometime around draft day on November 18th?
Well, first of all, if the Suns trade Devin Booker to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Chris Paul straight up, Robert Sarver needs to have the Phoenix Suns franchise stripped from him. James Jones needs to be fired and should not be given another GM job. and Monty Williams, he can still coach, but those two need to go because that would be the most ridiculous trade I have ever seen in my life. Let me get this straight. You're going to trade how old is Devin Booker, Callan? Is he like 23, 24?
I believe he's 24.
So you're going to trade a 24-year-old Devin Booker who just, broke out in the Orlando bubble and is on the peak to stardom and still has lots and lots of years left. And you're going to trade him to get an injury-riddled 35-year-old Chris Paul for what? Like, with Chris Paul, you're probably only going to get him for maybe 2 more years at best with him at his peak, and then he'll start slowing down because by the time, like his 2 years are done, he'll be 37. I don't think we can expect the great Chris Paul anymore, but that trade is just so stupid. You're basically giving up potentially like a 10-year window for a 2-year window just to probably contend for a 6 seed or 7 seed or 8 seed in the Western Conference. That's the dumbest trade that I would ever see in my life. I really hope that the Suns aren't seriously thinking about it. But in terms of this trade, though, if they don't trade Booker, I think this trade would be a great trade for the Phoenix Suns because I think if you can get Chris Paul without trading Booker, without trading Ayton, you would have one of the best point guards in the NBA running the floor, a guy that's been there. He's been to the playoffs. He's been to the highest level. He can teach these young Suns players how to win. Just look at Oklahoma City. And it would really help Devin Booker because remember, the last few years, Devin Booker has had to be the one operating the offense. Devin Booker's style of play is he's a great shooter. He's a guy that, doesn't really need the ball. He can be a catch and shoot type of guy. He's a guy that needs a point guard to run the offense, to take all the pressure off of his back so he can play freely. And with Chris Paul being in Phoenix, Devin Booker would be allowed to play freely, and he can be, I believe, a much better player than he is right now. And also, Chris Paul would definitely help DeAndre Ayton because remember what happened with the Clippers. Remember Lob City, guys? Chris Paul could just lob it up to DeAndre Ayton. He can go up and get that ball and slam it down. It would be a great trade, but I don't think with Chris Paul, it would be a good first step. But with Chris Paul, the Suns probably aren't getting past the first round of the playoffs.
Isaiah, the Suns probably have been the most tortured franchise, along with the Sacramento Kings in the NBA specific divisions, probably since Steve Nash left the second time after he had, led that great team of the 7 seconds or less Suns and Alvin Gentry and those guys. Probably one of my favorite, Laker opponents to watch was Phoenix back at their height in the mid to late 2000s, though. But if this actually happens, this is a trade that Phoenix can absolutely not afford to strike out on. They cannot afford to throw up the white flag and deal away one of those two guys. They can't deal away Booker, and they certainly cannot deal away Ayton in my mind. Now, the only thing here that might be a saving grace, Isaiah, is for that the Suns roster is young. They are, again, led by Booker and Ayton, but also they did go 8-0 to finish off their season. Again, they just narrowly missed the making the play-in tournament against Memphis or Portland during that run. But also they have the roster is great, but also let's also throw this caveat in too. Again, this is all per the reports from ESPN.com. They're also finishing off a $230 million renovation to Talking Stick Resort Arena in downtown Phoenix. And they also could have perhaps $20 million in salary cap space going into the transaction season, leaving the possibility that they could assemble a trade and still, though, look for other free agents on the market. So they probably could look at the trade, though, but also still look, though, at getting guys perhaps as well. Now, the only other saving grace, Isaiah, about Chris Paul going to Phoenix, and this is also in the report here, too, is that Chris Paul, two things about Chris Paul in Phoenix. Paul played for Monty Williams for 1 year in New Orleans, 2010 to 2011. Spoken highly of Monty Williams in the past, but also Paul has praised how the Suns have played in the past season, maybe the past couple years, though, in regards to how they in fact play now. And by the way, folks, he has 2 years and $85 million left on the 2 years and $85.5 million left on that contract. Again, and also this would not be the first time, though. The first time though that we have seen the Thunder perhaps trade somebody away. Again, we've seen them deal away Westbrook and Harden already, or at least getting Westbrook, I should say, at one point in time. But Isaiah, I do think though, man, that the Suns, in my mind, they have got to hit a home run here. They cannot afford, in my mind, to deal away Ayton, deal away Booker. But I agree though that if they can get Paul without having to give up one or both of those star players, and they're sitting pretty though. But if not though, they are in some deep, deep trouble.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's why I said that if the Phoenix Suns trade away Devin Booker for Chris Paul straight up, their window is only 2 years. Because let's face it, Booker would be gone to OKC in that deal. Then you would have Chris Paul, you would have DeAndre Ayton, and then you'll have probably Chris Paul for 2 years because his contract has 2 more years left on it. And then he's probably going to leave because at that time he's going to be 37 years old. I don't see him sticking with a team that their ceiling is 6th seed at best. So you would only have him for 2 years. That this is just a stupid move. If you're going to do it, you're going to have a 2-year window versus having Booker and Ayton for probably you're not going to win a championship with them, obviously, but you will probably have a 8 to 10-year window to compete in the loaded Western Conference rather than 2 years and then going back to a rebuild.
So, Isaiah, plenty of thoughts rolling in here about the news, but again, folks, some rumblings per reports. But again, Chris Paul perhaps Chris Paul being dealt away from Oklahoma City to the Phoenix Suns, per reports gathered again from Brian Windhorst and also fellow writers as well at ESPN.com. Some thoughts here, Isaiah, about this transaction, or again, this potential rumor here once more. James says, cannot see Chris Paul going to Phoenix if he wants to go to a veteran winning team that contends for a ring. And I think, Isaiah, more so, when you're a player like Chris Paul, though, at this stage of your career, and again, you've been with New Orleans, you've been with the Clippers, you've been with Oklahoma City, and you've been and you have been in the league for a while, but also as well, the last thing you want to do when you're in your mid-30s, getting close to being probably done with playing ball, is go to a team still rebuilding and still going through the growing pains of winning, of losing seasons, Isaiah. So I think that James is right, though. But Isaiah, what do you think, though, more so about, guys like Chris Paul perhaps wanting to win more so than go through rebuilds again in their career?
It's understandable because they're at the point of their career where I think for Chris Paul, I think he has 2-3 years at best at his peak before, he'll start going down that cliff. But I just think, he wants to win. These are the final years of his career. Why would he want to spend the final years of his career losing and, rotting away down in mediocrity while, guys like LeBron and, those other guys, they're winning all the time. It just doesn't make any sense for Phoenix's case.
Chardol says that Paul should go to the Lakers, not to Phoenix. Sammy Block saying, what's up? Of course, Sam, good to see you, our good friend. Christy Wilson, trading Booker to Oklahoma City for Chris Paul is ridiculous in her opinion. James also adds on, if I am Oklahoma City, there's not a lot I want from the Suns other than Booker. I mean, perhaps Booker or Ayton is probably the main two that I would look at being dealt from Phoenix to Oklahoma City. Isaiah, what do you got to add on?
If Devin Booker is available for trade, Rob Pelinka needs to get on the phone right now and see what they the Phoenix Suns are interested in. Maybe offer the farm for him to try to get Devin Booker because you need a third star to stand out in the NBA. Because if you're looking right now the NBA landscape, let's take a look. Boston isn't going anywhere. They got Jason Tatum, Kemba Walker, Jaylen Brown. They'll be here for a long, long time. The Nets, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, they're coming back. You've got Miami, they're loaded. They're going to have Giannis, and they might get Giannis and Antetokounmpo, which would shift the balance of power in the NBA. And now you go to the Western Conference. The Clippers, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, we know they have their issues, but, if they can set aside their issues, they are a very, very talented team. Denver is on the rise. Houston with James Harden, Russell Westbrook, they might not be champion, they might not, be the favorites for the championship, but still they're year in and year out championship contenders. And then you have other teams like Portland with Damian Lillard and I'm forgetting off the top of my head the Jazz as well with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert that are like they're on the rise as well. So you got to get that third star because the NBA landscape is not going to look like the same landscape it was this year. The NBA is going to get tougher in the upcoming years. So if you want to continue winning titles, you need that third superstar to help you stand out of that pack.
Kuzma and the Lakers 2020 draft picks for Booker. Would you do that?
I would do it in a heartbeat because I think that that would be a hell of a price to pay because that's not really that much because Kuzma has struggled. The pick, it's like 28, so that's not like that good of a pick. But if the Phoenix Suns want that, yeah, I would definitely give that.
No, I'm saying Kuzma and all of the Laker draft picks for this upcoming draft coming up, not just the first round, but all of them. Like we don't need them. We already got our 2 stars. Would you not do that if you're Phoenix? You get every single Laker pick. You get every single Laker pick and Kyle from this upcoming draft in 8 days and Kyle Kuzma, all that for Booker.
So that would be what, 2 picks and Kyle Kuzma?
At least the first round, and maybe you throw in 2 more future picks, maybe like 2021, 2022.
I would do that, but unfortunately, I think that Phoenix would want a lot more, given that Devin Booker's only 24 years old and he's got 3 more years left on his contract. So I think you might have to include a Caruso. You might have to include I just don't see like any of the veteran players that the Phoenix Suns would want. I think the best you can do is you might have to trade LeBron James, honestly, to get Devin Booker. I mean, that
is not. No.
Yeah, it's not going to happen, obviously, but I just don't see anybody on the Lakers like roster outside of Kuzma and Caruso and possibly those first round picks that the Phoenix Suns would want. Because obviously you're not going to get Rondo. They're not interested in Rondo. Dwight Howard, no way. JaVale McGee, possibly no way. So I think like if you want to get the trade done, I mean, I think the only person you have to include is LeBron James, which is never going to happen.
Could you imagine though LBJ in Phoenix though? Yikes! That'd be I mean, cool though for the Suns fans, but at the same time, it's like Phoenix of all the markets to go and play in. James says that Booker should go to a winning team that has a major piece or major pieces already in place. Again, Lakers, Clippers, Houston, but right now OKC not really built right now at this rate. Christie agrees, though, that if Booker is not dealt, but Paul and Booker playing together sounds better to me than him going anywhere else, or at least going to Oklahoma City. James says the New York Knickerbockers should trade for both Paul and Booker. I don't know if any star player like those two want to go play in New York with how they have just been so dreadful. But Isaiah, what do you got to add?
Like, I know right now the Knicks are super bad, but it might be a possibility because right now the person that is running the New York Knicks front office is Leon Rose, who was Devin Booker's former agent. So that might be a big possibility about where Booker could land.
Also, James shares the same sentiments as I do. Miss watching the long-haired Nash ball out, especially when he came back with that broken nose and the black guy against the Spurs after the clothesline he suffered. And also, James says they need a better sponsor for their arena in the Phoenix area. Talking Stick Resort Arena is the official name of the Purple Palace down there in PHX. Of course, if you're like me, though, you remember it being called America West Arena or U.S. Airways Center.
MI6 Sports Network Arena.
That's
come on, Phoenix, make it happen.
No, thanks. Chardol says that the Rockets should try to get Paul back to partner up with Harden. Probably not. No trade backs. We're not allowed to do that here. Also, as well, James says, loving that the NBA has a lot of great duos and not too many or any more big threes. That's pretty fair in regards to, again, the Celtics in 08, Miami with Wade, Bosh, and LeBron. And also, James is asking, though, how many picks do the Lakers have left from the AD trade, though? I don't think it was that many, though. I think it was only for, like, maybe a temporary ordeal.
If I remember correctly, I think it was not this year, but the next 3 years, if I could remember correctly. I think it's 2022, 2023, and 2024. I think that's what I remember reading on Twitter. I'm not sure about that. The Lakers picks though.
But I know it was a lot, but I think it was more like 2 to 3 years after 2020 concludes. And Christy says, real quick, the Knicks are a team where careers go to die. Definitely agree. And also, Christy says that the MI6 Sports Network Arena sounds like an awesome name for the Suns Arena down in the Valley of the Sun. That's a mouthful right there. And also, Isaiah says, LeBron for Booker, question mark, question mark, question mark. I say, what do I say? Oh, here it is. No. Absolutely not to that idea. But again, folks, potential chance here maybe. Again, Chris Paul perhaps being traded to the Phoenix Suns per reports gathered. With that, Isaiah still in the NBA, but the NBA's Board of Governors voted unanimously to approve an amended agreement to the CBA, clearing the way for a number of financial and competitive rule changes for the upcoming 2020-2021 72-game regular season format, starting up shop, as mentioned plenty of times, on December 22nd. The NBA and the Players Association and Players Union, for that matter, reached the agreement in principle late Monday night before Tuesday's vote. The deal, officially announced by the league on Tuesday, calls for free agency to open up at 6 o'clock Eastern time on Friday, November 20th, 2 days after next week's NBA draft takes place on November 18th. Salary cap is going to be set at $109.1 million, and the luxury tax will be at $132.6 million. The same numbers they were during last season before the league's finances took a drastic hit as a result of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, and also that teams had been expecting both numbers to remain the same next season for some time now, as it was better for both the teams and players to avoid a massive dump in the salary cap for next season because of the unplanned drop in league revenue. So Isaiah, no real surprise here in regards to, again, the league, getting the green light now to officially start up the season. So Isaiah, again, man, a 71-day off season. But again, Isaiah, pretty much though, man, not surprised that the players voted again unanimously to again approve the plans to get the season started though right away. Isaiah, your thoughts though as we in fact now gear up now for the draft and also for a very brief but somewhat condensed NBA season starting up in just about roughly a month, pretty much a month.
Well, Callan, my thoughts on this is that, number one, you're going to see a lot of load management early on in the season, especially from the Lakers, the Clippers, the Denver Nuggets, the Miami Heat, the Boston Celtics, a lot of the teams that were in the bubble that played deep into the bubble. They will be load managing their players because guys like LeBron, Kawhi, they're like, why would I want to play? Why would I want to play again after just a 71-day rest and, injure myself, possibly maybe suffer a devastating injury from that quick turnaround from not having enough rest and missing the playoffs. So you're going to see a lot of load managing early on. I think that for this season, we've been saying a lot on this show that the NBA should do what baseball did, which is they should have the teams in the West play the West and the East play the East, and nobody travels from East Coast to West Coast and vice versa. Therefore, you would minimize the chances of getting a coronavirus outbreak in one of your teams. But unfortunately, Callan, looking at the 72-game schedule, it tells me that the NBA, I think, is looking at having the entire league play one another. Because, if you did, let's say the West plays the West, you would not do a 72-game schedule. You would probably do, 60 games because you would only have, the team would probably play each other, 15 teams. You probably play 4 times. That's 60 right there, and that would be good. But with 72, I think the league is trying to accommodate for some West versus East and East versus West type of games, like Lakers Celtics, Lakers Heat, and other stuff like that. So unfortunately, I think the NBA will end up playing the entire schedule that we're used to with West versus East, East versus West. And I just think that's a bad idea. You might see an outbreak during the season, and I hope we don't, but you might see an outbreak. And the third reaction that I have to this news is that, hooray, man, because that means with the draft on November 18 and then 48 hours later, free agency starts, Imagine, dude, we're gonna be able to have a draft show, and then 48 hours later, I think on on No BS, we will be able to turn No BS into an NBA free agency show because the free agency period opens at 6 p.m. and we can make it like the Jumps NBA free agency special where we have like a buzzer or a button where every time there's a move, we push the button and boom, we have confetti flying everywhere. That's gonna be a great show, Callan. We got to plan that baby out.
You know, Isaiah, I still think that my plan though for conference only still would work though, because if that makes 60 games of playing the conference, then the other 12 games, I think you just play the division, a couple more times, and then you're good to go right there with a 72 game season. But again, folks, the NBA again unanimously approving plans to amend the CBA and get ready for the 2020-2021 season. Again, folks, starting up on December 22nd with the NBA draft coming up on November 18th. With that, Isaiah, in Major League Baseball, the ongoing award season continued on Tuesday with the Managers of the Year awards given out, and rightfully so. I think that this one was in fact right in my mind. Kevin Cash of the Rays and Don Mattingly of the Miami Marlins are the winners of the 2020 American League and National League Managers of the Year. More so, Isaiah, I think, though, that all 6 of these candidates, though, all 3 in the AL and all 3 in the NL, were so rightfully worthy. Again, you had Mattingly with the Marlins, Jace Tingler with the Padres, and I believe the other one, if memory serves me correct, was blanking out now on the third one, though. But yeah, either way, though, that they were all worthy. And also in the American League, of course, you had Rick Renteria, of course, now former White Sox manager, but also he was nominated, as was Kevin Cash and Charlie Montoyo of the Toronto Blue Jays. Isaiah, I know that, of course, that on Wild Sports Talk on Monday, John, you and myself kind of, had our gripes here in regards to the Rookie of the Year voting. But I think, Isaiah, that we all would agree, though, that they got this right, though, for both leagues in the Manager of the Year awards. Do you agree? And your thoughts, though, about both Don Mattingly and Kevin Cash winning the Manager of the Year awards for 2020?
1000% agree. Baseball finally got something right for once. These two guys, they deserved it 100%. I mean, Kevin Cash, this guy led a Tampa Bay Rays team that had the lowest payroll in all of baseball to the AL East title and the best record in the American League. He did a phenomenal job with that team. He did a great job. The only mistake that he made was pulling Blake Snell out in the 5th or the 6th inning of that Game 6 of the World Series. But hey, we make mistakes. It's all good. This guy is a great manager, and he's going to continue to do great things with the Rays for years to come. He's one of the brightest young managers in all of baseball, so I can't wait to see what he does with the Rays going forward. Don Mattingly, he deserved it. I mean, this guy had the worst team in the NL East the year prior to last season or this season. Then they have a big outbreak to start this season where they lost, I believe, 20 players of their 28-man roster. They had to go out on the streets and find players that had either been cut by other ball clubs or, were just out there practicing, just out there practicing. And then they signed those guys, and voila, the Miami Marlins somehow, some way, with all the misfits that they had on their ball club, all the players that they signed off the streets, they somehow, some way were able to make the playoffs and snap that long playoff streak. And then, not in the playoffs, they beat a team that many, myself included, said before the season that they could contend for the World Series because they had a lot of talent, and that was the Chicago Cubs, and they beat them in a 2-0 sweep, which was one of the most surprising results that I've seen in a long time watching baseball. Very, very well deserved for these two Florida managers.
Yeah, definitely agreed. Kevin Cash, I know, of course, probably is still haunted by pulling Blake Snell. But hey, like Isaiah said, though, we all make mistakes in games and life and at work and things like that, though. But I do think, though, Isaiah, that this was probably the right way to go. I do think, though, that Charlie Montoyo with the Blue Jays was a great manager for the Blue Jays this year. Of course, Rick Renteria sadly losing his job, though, after the White Sox flame out to the A's. Then, of course, in the National League, though, again, you had Mattingly, Tingler. And by the way, folks, the third manager was David Ross, former Cubs catcher, now the manager. So Isaiah, right there, though, you had two rookie skippers, Jace Tingler of the Padres and David Ross with the Cubs, both be up for manager of the year. They both get their teams into playoffs. But again, though, that the Marlins, though, had a, I think, much more compelling story. I think that James is right, though. To be honest, he writes in, anybody could have managed the Padres to their winning season. Tingler just happened to be in that spot, though, where Don Mattingly, Isaiah, per a stat I just saw, though, on ESPN.com, this was Mattingly's first winning season as a manager, I believe, since he left the Dodgers, that he finally had a winning season for the first time in his career. I want to say, I'll pull that back up in just a moment here. But I do think, though, that, Mattingly got that. Mattingly getting it, though, was rightfully so, because the Marlins, though, were so painfully bad for several years, though. They tried it in 2012 when they got Jose Reyes, and they, of course, rebranded. They went to that new ballpark, and they looked very flashy, and it didn't work out right away. And, of course, they went through another lengthy, 7-8 year rebuild, though. And again, a lot of no-name guys, a lot of unproven players, though. But they found a way, though, to, be resilient all season. Again, they had to deal with that very lengthy outbreak, or the outbreak, I should say, of COVID-19 earlier in the season. But they still, though, Isaiah, made it to the finish line, though. And then, of course, Kevin Cash, though, I think, yes, minus that blunder in the World Series, though, a very proven, I think, a very worthy winner, though, of the Manager of the Year. But again, folks, once more, but Don Mattingly of the Marlins, Kevin Cash of the Rays are the 2020 Managers of the Year for Major League Baseball in 2020. Again, folks, Mattingly and the Marlins finished the year 31-29. And also, this actually marks Mattingly's first. This marks his first winning season in Miami. He did have 5 winning seasons, I should say. I want to clarify that stat again. But this is Mattingly's first winning season in Miami, and he had 5 winning seasons in Los Angeles with the Dodgers at this juncture. So again, congrats to both Kevin Cash and congrats to Don Mattingly on being named the Managers of the Year. Isaiah, what do you got for us?
The only stain on Don Mattingly's resume for this season, even though he did a great job, is that he couldn't keep his players from going to those strip clubs early in the season. That's the only stain on his resume. But other than that, he did a phenomenal job. And this Marlins team, they're going to be fun to watch for years to come because they've got so much young talent on this ball club. They had a lot of experience this season. They had a lot of playoff experience this season from going to the playoffs and, beating the Cubs and then ultimately losing to the Braves. Plus, their farm system is ripe with talent. So this Marlin team, they're not going to be one and done. They're here for the long haul, ladies and gentlemen.
They definitely will be. Some more thoughts here real quick. James Gonzalez says, no one predicted Cash and the Rays would be the best in the American League, and they went 40-20 this regular season. Absolutely insane. And also, James says, I hope the Marlins never have another fire sale ever again. Also writing in is Laney Armstrong. Isaiah, can you report politics this way? It would be so much easier to get through the fog, ... I would hope that there would be a better way to do that, but we try our best to at least report sports this way. But I think we all wish that everything else could be reported the same exact way. And also, Laney agrees with Agent Skip Bayless in regards to his name. So, of course, Laney, thanks for being here. Isaiah, one other league trying to get back underway, hopefully sometime soon, of course, is the NHL. But of course, Isaiah, they're also coming off of a bubble environment, of course, taking place in Edmonton and in Toronto this past September and October. Of course, playing a 2014 tournament that included, of course, a qualifying round and the actual Stanley Cup playoffs. With that, though, with that in mind, Isaiah, per ESPN.com, and also more so, Isaiah, due to, again, the travel restrictions more so put in place here, but the NHL, folks, is considering temporary realignment of its teams for the upcoming season due to COVID-related travel restrictions per their commissioner, Gary Bettman, an announcement made on Tuesday by saying that travel restrictions on Canada, as well as limitations in terms of quarantining when you go from certain states to other states within the U.S. could mean the NHL creates a more regionalized alignment for the upcoming 2020-2021 season. The Board of Governors for the NHL is set to meet on Thursday, which will provide an update and possible recommendations for the season format based on talks between the league and Players Association, as the target date for the season the target date for next season remains New Year's Day of 2021. Commissioner Bettman said that the league is considering a few scheduling options for next season. Something though that is off the table, though, is bringing back the bubbles for the entire season in Toronto and in Edmonton to complete last season. But Bettman said teams opening in their own arena is a possibility, along with a modified bubble environment during some point of the season. Bettman also indicated as well that the NHL is exploring a hybrid bubble environment where some teams are in a bubble, some teams play at home, and you move in and out. Now, Isaiah, this is going to be very interesting to see how the NBA or how the NHL, I should say, Isaiah, will be able to move this around, though, because as we know, though, 7 of the 31 teams in the NHL are based up north in Canada. You have Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg, Montreal, and Toronto, and Ottawa being across the border. And again, there's been, of course, a lot of discussion about what happens with this. I've heard a lot of rumblings, though, with maybe a all Canadian division where all the Canada teams play in one division. We've heard a lot of talk, though, about them perhaps realigning amongst maybe geographical location. But Isaiah, though, the main talking point here, though, at this rate, Isaiah, is not a bubble for the entire season, but hybrid cities kind of being used as hubs to play maybe 10 or 12 games at rinks, at home arenas, with practice rinks already built somewhere close by. So more so, Isaiah, it's more of a hub environment, though, that we had kind of talked about maybe a little bit, though. But Isaiah, what probably do you think, though, is maybe the best route for the NHL to go, though? Because I've heard, discussions maybe about, all the Canada teams being in one division. Maybe there's been talk, too, of maybe, certain venues, like, for example, SAP Center in San Jose, Staples Center, Honda Center, maybe T-Mobile Arena, or, arenas in big cities that have enough hotels nearby, but also have practice rinks. Isaiah, what do you make, though, about the NHL perhaps going to temporary realignment again due to the nature, of course, of the pandemic still holding its grasp right now in the entire world?
I think that it's a great idea by the NHL because you have to do it simply because a lot of the teams in the NHL, they play in Canada, and then you have another half of the teams playing in America. So it makes it very difficult with all the restrictions and regulations and stuff like that for the U.S. team to go to Canada, and then they have to quarantine. So it just gives it a lot of headaches. So I think the best way for the NHL to do this is I think the NHL needs to have it where the Canadian teams play all Canadian teams and the American teams play all American teams. That way, like you could keep you don't have to go through like all those restrictions and regulations when traveling to Canada. And then I think in the end, for the playoffs, they can do the same thing where the Canadians teams play the Canadian teams, the American teams play the American teams, which would really save a lot of the travel and minimize exposure to this virus. And then in the end, for like the Stanley Cup final, they can have it where the Canadian team plays the winner of the American or the U.S. team.
Yeah, now the only thing, though, that will be very confusing is perhaps the playoffs when that rolls around now, Isaiah. The one thing, though, that the NHL did ponder that is back now in the limelight of this story, though, ma'am, is a hub environment. Now, again, there was some talk, though, about maybe 10 to 12 venues being used to play out certain rounds of the playoffs until they end up going to Toronto and to Edmonton for both of their bubbles. But Isaiah, pretty much, though, per ESPN sources about this, though, is that Bettman said, though, in this report here, that they're exploring the possibility of playing in home arenas with or without spectators, but also perhaps, though, of a hub environment where teams go to, for example, let's say the Sharks go and play in the Los Angeles or Orange County bubble in Southern California. They would play games or play for 10 to 12 days at either Staples Center or at Honda Center. Again, as an example, you play a bunch of games without traveling. You'll go back, go home for a week, be with your family, and then come back and play more games. So Isaiah, as we actually lose him, folks, here real quick. But I think, though, that the NHL, though, I think, has time to figure this out, though. And I think that more so with the NHL not jumping to conclusions or rushing through the process, because as I think, folks, that we all kind of agree, though, that the NBA probably more so looking at the revenue losses, kind of rushing to the finish line or jumping to conclusions about we got to get the season going on this date, no exceptions, starting and all that, where you're running the risk of both injury and also running the risk, though, of course, of positive COVID tests, though. But of course, the NHL, though, has some very big, hurdles to jump over right now at the rate that they're going right now, as we've already have talked about, due to, again, the nature of right now the issues more so with the Canadian teams being a very big talking point, though. And more so, I think that it more so in a way, though, that I think it does raise a bit of, some intrigue, though, about it. In fact, that Canada has all their teams playing one division, though. How does that, in a way, affect the playoff race? Do you still keep them in the Western Conference, the Eastern Conference, because of where they're at, though? So, again, a lot of things to dissect here, but I think, though, that a modified bubble, or more so this hub environment, in my mind, sounds to be a very feasible option. I think, though, that Laney had a very interesting point, though, that they should use local venues that are within a reasonable distance. Now, again, there's really no set spots right now, Laney. But what they had discussed, though, in the discussions with the Players Association and with the league office, was that they would, for example, I think that the example that I was given was a hub environment or a modified bubble in Las Vegas. They have T-Mobile Arena for the Golden Knights. They could have used the City National Arena as a practice rink or practice facility for all the teams. And also, Laney also asked about college arenas. That would more so be a spot, I would think, though, for practices. Again, if perhaps you can't use the rinks that are, in fact, usable at this time, we'll get back Isaiah back in here. Isaiah, some of the thoughts here more so. Again, James says, got to have regionalized bubbles for the NHL. I think, though, more so, Isaiah, I think I've been thinking, though, more so about these, what they're calling them, pretty much modified bubbles, where, again, it's not really a bubble, but more so a hub environment where, again, though, you have hotels, you have practice rinks, you have a arena, like, for example, again, SAP Center, Staples Center, Honda Center, Gila River Arena in Glendale, Arizona, or T-Mobile Arena. You have the venues in place. You have practice rinks, too, somewhere close by. And, of course, plenty of hotels in the area. So, Isaiah, I think more so that probably, in my mind, could work for both the NHL, but also I think, Isaiah, could be one that I think works for the NBA, though. But, Isaiah, your thoughts about the NHL and perhaps what they're calling right now modified bubble environments, more so of going to a spot, playing about maybe 10 or 12 games, and then going back home and getting some time away from the rink.
I actually like it because, it minimizes travel, and also it gives the athletes less fatigue. They don't have to travel. They just go to the rink, play the games, and then go back to the hotel, and they can do whatever the heck they want. And then they basically do that over and over and over. So I really like that idea. And then, Callan, did you say after 10, 12 days, they get to go back home and rest with their families and then come back afterwards?
That is correct. They would play 10 to 12 days, play a bunch of games without traveling, go back and go home for a week.
Oh, I like that idea, since, with the bubbles, you get to, you don't have that much fatigue put on your body. And then after that, you can go home, rest, recuperate, recover, and then go back and go through the grind again. So I really like that idea. I think the NHL should have this idea incorporated with the idea of the Canadian teams in one division and the U.S. teams in another division. I think that would be best for the NHL.
We'll see what they work out. Some more thoughts. Again, Laney had a very great point, though. They should be using local venues that are within a reasonable distance. I believe, though, as mentioned, again, Vegas was a spot, perhaps. T-Mobile Arena, of course, right smack dab in the middle of the strip. You have plenty of casinos and hotels. A practice rink is close by as well. More so, again, Laney, I would say, though, that college arenas would perhaps be used, though, more so for practices more than games. Laney also has one more thought here. Do Canadian teams have less teams than we do? They have, I think, 7 teams are in Canada. The other, 31, 30, quick math, 31 minus 7 is 20, 26, I believe, are in the U.S. So, yes, there's only 7 teams in Canada. Isaiah, James agrees with you. If the Canadian travel restrictions continue through the season, then there should be a separate Stanley Cup series. Canadian champ and a U.S. champ should be crowned in his mind. Sadly, though, that would break a 26-year. That would sadly, though, break the curse though of Canada not winning the Cup since 1993. And also, James says that the NHL should play series like Major League Baseball does. As someone who has seen this happen before at the junior level, at least, where you play a team 3 straight days, that perhaps could perhaps work. Laney also agrees with you, Isaiah. This actually sounds like an idea that would be a great way to play for the athletes without travel fatigue. And also, if it's not for a home team, that is a fair way to play. Again, as mentioned, all the games were mutual for or neutral for all of the teams that were, again, playing in the NHL bubble. With that in mind, folks, we have ourselves some more breaking news in regards to the NBA. And with that, folks, this late breaking news again comes courtesy of the NBA. And Isaiah, apparently it is some leaked Christmas Day games already coming out on the NBA schedule.
Yeah, according to Brian Windhorst, his sources are telling him that Lakers Warriors will headline the Christmas Day slate. So we'll probably see LeBron James, Anthony Davis versus Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and hopefully LaMelo Ball on Christmas Day. It's going to be a fun game, whether it's in San Francisco or down at Staples Center in Los Angeles.
I think, Isaiah, with how the Lakers have usually been the home team on Christmas Day, they've kind of been, this has kind of in a way become the Lions and Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day, where the Lakers are usually at home. I think only one year recently, I think there's only been one season that I can recall recently that the Lakers were not at home on Christmas Day to play a game. So I would think that more so the Lakers on Christmas Day would make total sense. But again, folks, that is some breaking news again from Brian Windhorst of ESPN. Again, apparently Golden State versus the Lakers on Christmas Day, probably in the evening sometime on Christmas Day coming up in just over a month. With that in mind, Isaiah, we'll now segue over and get ready to wrap things up with tonight's Final Thoughts. All right, folks, time to wrap things up on this Tuesday night, the night shift in our 21st episode. Isaiah, what do you got for us, buddy, for your final thoughts for tonight's program?
Well, Callan, before I get into my final thoughts, I just want to thank James Gonzalez, Laney Armstrong, Christy Wilson, Shardo Gupta, as well as Stephen Wang as well for tuning in tonight and watching our show. We really, really appreciate you guys. Thank you guys so much for the love and support. You guys are the best fans in the world. And, we are like, we couldn't do anything without you guys. So thank you guys so much for your support and your love. It means a lot to us. Ladies and gentlemen, my final thoughts is tune in tomorrow for a very special Veterans Day special of Wild Sports Talk. Unfortunately, however, Callan won't be able to join us tomorrow, but it will be me, John, and Stephen Wang filling in for Callan, as we will have Boston Globe's Gary Washburn come on the show tomorrow to talk about all things NBA. We're going to get into the latest regarding the NBA draft, the latest regarding NBA free agency, whether or not Victor Oladipo is a reasonable trade option for the Lakers, as well as Gary's experience in the Orlando bubble. It's going to be a fun show. Can't wait for it. Gary Washburn at 5 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow, Wild Sports Talk Veterans Day special. And also, ladies and gentlemen, tune in next week, Wednesday, for we're not going to have Wild Sports Talk. We are going to have our first annual MI6 Sports Network NBA Draft live show. Callan, do you know what time have we settled on to start that show?
Not yet.
Yeah, the time is to be determined, but we're going to start the show. The draft is at 4 p.m., so I think we're going to start somewhere around 3:30 and 4 p.m. We're going to be there. We're going to be watching the draft. We're going to be reacting to all the picks as they come in one by one. So make sure you guys grab your popcorn, tune in, as you'll probably see some hilarious reactions from us, especially Martin Garcia, our Warrior fan, Stephen Wang, our Timberwolves fan, who has the #1 pick. So who knows? Maybe if the Timberwolves do something stupid, like draft a guy that is supposed to be drafted number 30 at #1, Stephen might freak out and leave the stream altogether. It'll be such a great moment. And also, last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, tune in on, I think, either Saturday, November 21 or Friday, November 20. We haven't really settled the date yet. That's coming shortly, but tune in for that, as we will have our first annual Thanksgiving special. The entire cast and crew of the MI6 Sports Network will gather around the table. We'll talk sports. We'll be talking basketball. We'll talk about college football. We'll talk about the NFL, we'll talk about MLB, and also we're gonna, get into what are we thankful for in this tumultuous 2020 year. It's gonna be a fun show. Can't wait to eat turkey on the show and makes Callan, Jonathan, and all the other guys mouth water. So it's gonna be a fun couple of weeks coming here on the MI6 Sports Network.
Got some comments rolling in real quick. Christy, about the potential Lakers-Warriors game on Christmas Day. Lakers-Warriors should be fun on Christmas Day. Landy agrees with an applause emoji. Give them something to look forward to. I agree. And also James says, would be pretty awful if a lot of the star players are sitting out those Christmas Day games for the NBA. Again, as mentioned, with them, again, going to a 71-day offseason due to, again, perhaps revenue loss from the upcoming, or due to, again, the COVID-19 pandemic. But again, folks, plenty to look forward to, as mentioned here from Isaiah. As mentioned, Gary Washburn joins the program here, folks, tomorrow at 5 o'clock Pacific time. Again, folks, I'll be sadly not able to join tomorrow again due to a family celebration, as my sister-in-law and brother welcome their second child coming up next Thursday. Hopefully all goes according to plan. So we'll again be away with you be away from you folks tomorrow. And also, folks, again, plenty more coming up. And again, we invite you folks to stay tuned to stay tuned to our social channels for plenty more updates. And of course, folks, we're getting ever so closer to 2,000 listens on Anchor. So again, folks, we're hopefully going to be able to get that done before the end of the month. And again, we'll also, folks, be having a few more things coming up very soon. With that in mind, Isaiah, back over to you.
Oh, one last thing, guys. We are thinking about enacting a network policy where I don't show up on the show if the Broncos, the 49ers, the Georgia Bulldogs, Michigan, USC, if they lose. I am not showing up on the show. You might see that network policy coming into effect sometime soon.
No. Got to face the music, big fella. You got to face the music, sadly. Do not even say you're not going to. You've got to face the music when your teams don't perform well enough to win a ball game. And also, Laney agrees. Look forward to you guys always. And also, Christy says, my final thoughts, fun show tonight. And also, she says, no, about you leaving the set in regards to not showing up when your teams lose games. So, he tries all the time. He tries all the time, and of course, I got to hit him with the Bugs Bunny no gif every single damn time when he tries to get out of hosting a program because of his team's utter failure to win a ball game over the course of the day. But again, folks, for Isaiah Leung and for the entire cast and crew of the MI6 Sports Network, yours truly, Callan McClurg, saying goodnight here on this Tuesday. Again, folks, join Isaiah, John, and Steven with Gary Washburn from the Boston Globe at 5 o'clock Pacific time tomorrow for a special WST Veterans Day special. We're going to talk all things going on in the NBA with Gary Washburn of the Boston Globe. And again, we'll be back, folks, on the night shift on Saturday and Sunday at 10 o'clock this upcoming weekend, back here on the 6th. Till next time, folks, have a good rest of your night. Take care, stay safe, and stay healthy. And so long. Bye-bye.